Random House Audio presents The Power Broker, Robert Moses and the Fall of New York, by Robert E. Caro, Volume 3, read for you by Robertson Dean. Chapter 35. R.M. The man who ruled the empire called Triborough ruled it absolutely. There were other members on the boards of its 4 constituent public authorities, but the decisions were all his. Visiting Moses on Randall's Island one day, Cleveland Rogers rose to leave when 2 men came into his office, but Moses said not to bother. There was an exchange of questions and answers, a very brief exchange, after which the 2 men quickly departed. Asking who they were, Rogers learned that he had been sitting through a monthly meeting of the Triborough Bridge Authority. The passion that fired that man, who in 1948 celebrated his 60th birthday, was the passion that had fired that man at 30, the passion for tangible physical accomplishment, and for the power which that accomplishment produced. And if age had not slaked his appetite for power and achievement, neither had it slaked his appetite for the means to power and achievement: work. No strictly rational explanation could account for the voraciousness of that appetite. In his early days of power, he had sloughed off all hobbies and relaxations save swimming. Now, 25 years later, he still had no other hobbies or relaxations. He still did not golf, did not play bridge, did not attend sporting events or the theater. In 1960, Ernie Clark gave him tickets to the musical comedy Fiorello. Because of its subject, Moses went, and in thanking Clark, mentioned to him that it had been the first Broadway play he had seen in years. Guests at his home can recall no single day that he spent with his family, with the 2 daughters he loved and the grandchildren on whom he doted, on which he did not disappear for hours into his study and shut the door behind him. He still refused to allow any of the chores that consumed chunks of other men's lives, buying clothes and getting haircuts, for example, to consume chunks of his. As she had been doing since the day she married him, Mary still ordered his socks and underwear, bought his suits, carried them home, if they weren't the correct size, took them back and brought home others, and when she got one that fit, arranged for a tailor to come to his office and make minimum alterations. When she saw he needed a haircut, had a barber brought in, and, if he was going out to dine, placed money in his pocket. If she forgot, he would have to ask his companion for $1 or 2 for the waiter. He still invited friends for weekends at the rambling old house on Thompson Avenue in Babylon, went clamming with them and his family on Fire Island, was the most charming and gracious of hosts. But the more perceptive among them knew always that they were there not because of friendship, but for a purpose, and that before the weekend was over, Moses would be putting his big arm around their shoulders and working for the vote or the administrative decision that he needed from them. A quarter of a century before, he had sloughed off the last remaining amenities of life and set before himself a life that would be a feast of work. In 1958, at the age of 70, he would still be sitting before that feast with undiminished appetite. During the 1920s, Moses had established a routine under which, whenever he was living in Babylon, the chief engineer of the Long Island State Park Commission, Arthur Howland, called every morning at 7:30 at Thompson Avenue to pick up a big manila envelope bulging with the memos, letters, press releases, and directives to his executives that Moses had written since leaving the office the night before. Now, after 25 years of picking up that envelope, Howland was gone, but the envelope was still there. Every morning, without fail, Howland's successor, Sid Shapiro, would call at Thompson Avenue, and every morning, without fail, he would find it sitting there on the newel post at the bottom of the banister. "My God," says one of his secretaries, "he was a dynamo. Every morning there would be a manila envelope this thick, and 6 girls would be working all day to do the things he had done overnight." Working, that is, after Hazel Tappan had deciphered his handwriting, unintelligible except to his Juno-esque chief secretary. The mail, a huge stack of it, would be waiting for him on the desk of whichever one of his 4 offices he was using that day. Summoning 3 secretaries to ring his desk, he would plow through the letters so rapidly, scribbling instructions on some, snapping off orders about others, dictating replies, tossing the letters to the 3 women in rotation, that within 30 minutes the huge stack of paper would have melted down to the bare desktop. During the 1920s, Moses had turned the big black Packard in which he had to spend so much time into an office, holding conferences in it with aides whose own limousines trailed behind, waiting to take them off when the conferences were finished, carrying with him always a supply of legal notepads and sharpened pencils, and using the time in the limousine for work. Now the limousine was a Cadillac instead of a Packard, but it was still an office. Age withers the output of most men, but as decade succeeded decade in the career of Robert Moses, his output seemed only to increase. The flow of broadsides delivered daily to 1,000 desks never slackened. Every morning when you came in, there on your desk would be the mimeographed memos that Moses had sent to someone and circulated to everyone else, Lawrence Orton says. They had been on Orton's desk from the day of his appointment to the City Planning Commission in 1938. They were on his desk in 1948 and 1958, and there seemed to be more of them than ever. Orton, who read the memos out of a fearful fascination, says, "It took the first half to 3/4 of an hour every day to catch up on your Moses correspondence." Says Latham, "During the time I knew him, and I knew him for 45 years, hours didn't mean anything to him. Days of the week didn't mean anything to him. When there was work to be done, you did it. That was the way he was then, and that's the way he is now." If age could not wither his passion for work, sun, even tropical sun, could not bleach it. For years he had not taken a vacation. Now he did, if infrequently, generally in winter to the Caribbean, although it is notable that most of these vacations were to the luxurious island retreats of Bernard Gimbel or Robert Blum of Abraham and Straus, or of other powerful men whose support he needed. But as his mail secretary, Harold Blake, sorted through each day's mail during his boss's vacation, out would tumble envelope after envelope addressed in his boss's scrawl and crammed with memos and orders. Wind could not cool that passion. Tearing himself away from his desk, he would on some afternoons head for the Sea Elf and his beloved Great South Bay. In the afternoons, the breeze on the bay would be fresh and crisp. Beneath the big cruiser, the flounder might be running, but on more days than not, his only catch would be another full manila envelope. The captain would cruise back and forth over the bay hour after hour. Hour after hour, the figure sitting silently in the deck chair at the stern would be hunched over memos and maps and blueprints. Late in the afternoon, he might take the wheel himself, but the charts his mind would be seeing would not be charts of the bay. Once Captain Pearsall forgot to keep watch for a few minutes, and Moses ran the boat straight into a clearly visible sandbar. Illness could not sap it. His were few and far between, and even the most serious of them, an eye operation in 1955, when he was 66, did not slow him down. On the morning after the operation, he was dictating in his hospital room at 7 o'clock. The colds and flus and viruses that deflect other men from their work did not deflect him from his. Meeting Moses at home after Shapiro had told him that R.M. was running a 104-degree fever, Ptolemy found him propped up in bed surrounded by mounds of documents. "He was writing a speech," Ptolemy recalls. "He put it down and plunged right into the subject of my visit, without a minute's break." He had lost none of the furious urge that made him work. It was too strong to allow him to keep seated for long. "He would drive me crazy with his pacing," says Joe Ingraham of the Times. "I have a back condition, and I'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden Moses wouldn't be there in front of me anymore. He'd be pacing around the room as he talked. I'd have to keep twisting around to follow him, and he'd keep pacing, and I'd have to keep twisting and twisting." Sometimes Ptolemy, major supplier of the money for Moses' dreams, would arrive at Randall's Island to find Moses waiting for him outside the front door, as if he had been unable to wait the extra minute until Ptolemy reached his office on the second floor.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?